You said you don't like your shoe.
I just really wanted to spend the night here.
They're worse than water.
Okay, Uma, you had
Answer your
a
question.
couple of additional questions before we move off of the file.
Yeah, just regarding the vetting, so I assume that would be the minimum criteria that's outlined in the property board guidelines is what would be, we'd be looking at for the vetting. Like if a project meets that, and we would say, yeah, you guys are, meet the minimum quals, go ahead and submit a long form. Is that how it would work out?
I'm not sure I 100% understand.
The vetting,
For the
so the
project.
project
short forms.
conceptual comes, the conceptual short form comes in, what criteria will be used to vet it? Like what will be
To
used?
determine whether it's gonna move forward.
Exactly.
Right. Anybody got a suggestion?
Well,
You have
I
a
do.
suggestion?
I would suggest the minimum, DWR requirements in the property for, and then I guess if it meets those and it addresses at least one of the goals, or objectives, within the plan, then it would be deemed, it could go forward.
What happens if two of them are like right here and basically the same animal? I mean, everybody's seeing a little difference, so at that point, you could really, I mean, you're still vetting at that point, the possibility of two becoming one.
Yeah.
We lost our RAC experts, Mike and John, but I recall from RAC, a lot of times the RAC would give some feedback too. You know, you tell them, yes, you can go forward, but we really want you to do something like this, so like, if they're neighboring projects, you better contact this other person and you guys think about getting together on it, or,
Yeah, there you
or
go.
address this better, or whatever,
Mhm.
something like that.
Okay. So would you like staff to draft those up and send them to the work group?
It would be helpful.
Putting the management group
That's a
together?
good deal.
Mhm. Yep, that would be good.
So Una, on your checklist on the short zone A through L, you really laid those out, right? The DWR mandated consideration.
Right.
And those really translate to a lot of stuff in the long form too, right?
They do, I mean, the hope, the way this conceptual form was developed was, well, it's also in the work group. If you remember, we had that project development manual that we looked at, and this came out of there. So they can look at that work group manual to help them fill this out, for one thing, which is really helpful. But then also, the narratives they put in here should be able to be put into the long form and just revised, for feedback and clarified. And then that should help them with the long form.
Right. So in point of fact, doing the short form is part of the prep work to do the long.
Right.
So it's not like something totally disconnected. Carl, you had a comment, then Mike, and then Russell.
Right. Well, I was just gonna ask a question about, you're gonna have some criteria, the minimum criteria from BWR to vet these things. When do members of the public, how do we get to see that?
To see the criteria?
No, to see the, yeah, so that we can evaluate whether or not whether we agree. I mean, because if you've got an applicant who applies under the same set of rules and they fix the same check marks, and another applicant, they're exactly alike in terms of the check marks, and one's approved and one's not, how does the public know that?
Done in public, the review is done publicly.
Everything's in a public meeting.
There's no secrecy.
This is the Brown Act function right here.
This is a Brown
Act. That's
Yeah, we don't do anything behind.
On top of the fact,
But
you just
that's a fair,
basically
that's a fair
illustrated.
question. That's where the prioritization comes in. I mean, that's been my concern from the start. That's where we get pointed at
Right.
for being biased.
But that argument perfectly illustrates exactly what he just said and what I said, that basically if you get two that are even remotely, you're trying to get the best you can to get a grant, to get a project done. Two of them could be equal, like you said.
That's your job.
What we're trying to do is all the money, the two of them working together has gotta have more horsepower than one.
Yeah, but you folks have to make the decision.
Sure,
to
yeah,
get
sure.
this.
Right, right.
Well,
But we can encourage.
There's an, I mean, Chris, is highly optimistic statement. we are pessimistic in believing that we will have $1 bazillion worth of requests and $20 worth of funding. Is that what we're talking about here? I mean, is that really the sleeping donkey in the corner? That we're basically saying, we're not gonna have enough money, so we have to figure out a way to fund some of them?
Well, if you don't, you got a problem.
Well, actually, under Prop 84, we don't have any money to fund anything. We started out clearly saying that. What we're trying to do is assist in identifying problems and packaging proposals, so when other money's available, people are ready to go seek that money.
Yep.
And that was the point I tried to make earlier, that even if they don't make it through our process, there's nothing on earth that would prevent them
Oh, yeah,
from
yeah.
going after other grant
But
funding
that's what
with
I'm
that
saying.
same package.
And
Under
our
our
board
control, if money comes to us.
Right.
If money comes to us, we're, I guess we're assuming that there's not gonna be enough money. All these requests are gonna be, because if that's our assumption, I'm just saying, we have to set the stage for infamous item
That
number 7.
definitely is the assumption. And
That's our
based
assumption. I
on
just wanna
past
make sure that's
history,
clear.
it's probably not an assumption, it's probably
reality.
real.
Yeah, I don't think that's realistic.
The purpose of the question was that, this was a discussion that was had in the legislature about Prop 1, and whether or not, how much of it should be funded through an IFIM.
Mhm.
And as you noticed, there was almost none.
Right.
And that was the worry from the urban areas, is that they would approve one under criteria, reject another under criteria. Nobody could determine what the difference was. And so it made it in terms of getting the money out, it made it a complicated fashion and was subject to a whole lot of political controversy.
Well, like we said, it's all gonna be in a public forum and public discussion, and I guess we'll take the heat for our decisions, which is normally what happens.
And somebody ultimately has to narrow it down.
That's it.
So my understanding from the conceptual form, when that comes in and goes to the initial vetting, it'll just be, yes, it qualifies to move forward with the long form, or no, it doesn't
And push it in my
qualify.
head.
Right,
Not, it wouldn't be, it's not a determination of whether we like this one or this one.
right. No, it's just whether it meets that baseline criteria.
Good point.
And if you're talking with the short form, you're still talking the possibility of two working together, and ultimately the long form comes out from two different groups.
But part of the
Or
vetting
individuals.
could be, as Joe suggested, recommendations, if there are projects that are similar in the same, that could be packaged, that make them stronger projects, then
Sure.
that could be some recommendations.
As a matter of fact, I think we probably encourage that. There's one of your criteria that you have in here, under 7, I guess I hate to go there yet. But one of those actually, I see her, I'm not finished yet.
I'm not letting her finish.
One of them actually gives points for partners, if that is approved. So that's the type of thing I could see. Terry?
Yeah, I guess just for a little bit of clarification from a coordinator standpoint, Uma, the form that we have in here, this is the conceptual, where do we identify the entity? Because don't we, as I remember the process, in order for these projects to move forward, does it have to be through an entity that is signed the MOU? Or, at one time, am I confusing some things right now for projects to move forward? How does that tie? Like, I mean, where's the question that says who's moving this project
Who's the
forward?
lead
And the
organizer?
lead organization?
Yes, we should probably add that too.
Okay. And is it true that, I mean, they do have to have been, because right now we have, 5 signatories only? So that means,
Right, so one of, some of the eligibility criteria that is usually put in the forms is, will this entity adopt the plan upon approval? So that is a criteria for inclusion in the plan.
but for this pre-concept, I mean, if you have an entity that's putting it forward that has no intention of signing the MOU, wouldn't that be like or,
Here's the point, the MOUs need to be signed.
Right.
I mean, people have been dragging their feet on, but maybe this will prompt people to.
Yeah, I would say,
I think it's.
I mean, if people haven't
Is it-
signed the
yeah, I might
MOU,
have
we
missed it,
can't
but
very
that's
well deal with them when you come right down to it, so.
I can add that as a basic eligibility to the form. You have to be a signatory to an MOU and adopt the plan.
And then have an entity that, at the pre-concept level, you kind of
Right,
have an
or a
entity
sponsoring entity that has.
for your project, right?
Or be willing to.
willing to.
That's the
We gotta put
infamous
that in
pledge
writing.
allegiance.
Otherwise, you're gonna get a lot of ideas that are just like
Check
anybody and their
box
mother
it.
will write an idea and throw it, and then you're gonna waste time vetting a project
Sure.
and never had a champion to take it through.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I think that would encourage the buying into the plan and signing the MOU.
One of my observations is there's a lot of participation, and nobody's really done a lot of the MOU stuff with their entities. It's really enlightening to see how many people are willing to commit to the time, come to these meetings, both working group and this meeting, when the MOUs have not been really vetted with their organization.
Well, I think they have the best, I understand that completely,
Your
that's the best
extension.
of both worlds, you get to go have your input, participate, and you're not obligated to a damn thing. I mean, I understand that too.
Well, I asked that question also at first meeting on work group, though, is who is supposed to sign the MOUs? Is the chair of the work group, am I supposed to sign?
No,
the
it's,
MOU?
it's the,
Terry, did we sign our MOU?
You have not, Russell, you're one.
Ours is signed, Russ.
Sierra Valley RCD.
You don't have to
The
use my
county's
first
been
name,
signed.
you can say, no, I did with this RCD. It's not like I personally have.
Well, I was pointing out
Find
it's so
that.
positive, people have been willing to
Thank you.
participate without that MOU signed.
and you haven't said it as many things as I have, where what I just said was the point.
So would it be required that we have a signed MOU for submittal of the conceptual plan?
I
That
think
just
so,
made your job
because
really
why
easy.
waste our time, you know,
There-
I mean, there's the other way to look at it, why waste our time evaluating it
Something
if
that's
they're not
maybe-
willing to sign on to the thing that we're representing and working on?
That's right.
I know Frank's got an MOU, so it's.
First one.
No, Rouse, you showed it up.
I know, he's a high.
So the pressure's on, get those MOUs signed.
Ours is not.
Yep.
Are yours in?
Okay, anything else?
Okay, I'm good.
Don't fight boys, Jesus.
Well, I'm warming up for seven.
I know. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to 6. Hopefully that won't be as contentious as 7. Schedule outreach meeting.
So this is a change, this will be changed up here. So there's a number of outreach meetings identified for this project development process. There are 2 meetings, public meetings to solicit and hear projects throughout the region, and that's to pull in projects and folks who may not be actively involved in the work groups, but who still want to have projects considered. And those are, the plan was to have them in various locations within the region. And then it's also an opportunity to explain the process and answer questions too. So
How's
there's
that
those,
schedule affected now by your June 1 short one?
these numbers in here, that in the agenda item will have changed, not the numbers, but the dates. So the thought was to have mid to late April. That might still apply.
That's pretty tight.
Well, so maybe the end of April, because we still have that June 1 deadline for the conceptual. So maybe the end of April, beginning of May.
Your brochure and your video will help a lot to kick it out anyway.
Well, what,
Well, they have to do the same thing that they do now.
So we accept
They would have to be willing to sign on to the MOU.
I know.
You don't get much.
The clock is ticking. So you're saying instead of mid to late April, look at the end of April?
End of April, early May, and that would give folks still another month to fill out the conceptual form.
Okay, so let's see what this may look like. So when are you thinking that the best day to have these, day of the week type thing?
I'm not sure, I mean, as far as the planning processes that have been, for this, and have been done in this region, what works.
Because the advertising and promotion is time.
I'm sorry?
Advertising and promotion takes time, that's a couple of weeks.
Right.
Newspapers.
Well, you know, it's kind of like, what's your target audience? If you want people that work, I mean, we're talking people that aren't in part of the process right now. They're probably not gonna make something during work hours if they aren't already pretty engaged. That leaves you weekends.
Or midweek Wednesday,
Yeah.
6 o'clock type thing, it always seems to work.
Midweek Wednesdays,
And then, like 6 in the evening, or,
yeah.
so that puts us in May, that'd be like the 6th,
This is the meeting for the
Outreach.
outreach.
This is trying to get new participation.
So what do you
Yeah, we'll
think
clarify
of,
what's going on.
May 6th? 6 or 13?
Sorry, that works.
One or two.
There will be 2 meetings, in various locations. So we could do them back to back, or we could do them, 1 week and the second week.
I would leave that up to you.
But if you're gonna hold them to the same criteria, having the information in by June 1, you're not giving them enough time.
I'm thinking let's shoot for the 6th of May. And we will leave it up to you guys to figure out what works for your schedule, because that's who has to really travel and fit it into their schedule. But I think the midweek Wednesday seems to be a day that works for people. Doesn't interfere with leaving town on Friday or being in the field on Friday.
Okay, so the other 2 workshops, is a project integration workshop. And that's where all the workers come together and look at how they can, create multi-benefit regional projects and, identify those projects with regional significance. There's that, and then there's also the climate change workshop. The climate change folks are ready to bump up their workshop to June, if we're all ready for that. One thought was to hold those 2 workshops on the same day, and just have one day dedicated to it, have the project integration workshop in the morning, maybe do a barbecue for lunch, so folks stick around, and then do the climate change workshop in the afternoon. That was a thought, that I would put out there.
I like that idea.
It's a good idea.
And it saves you traveling all over creation.
And
So,
What is the climate change thing?
so there's a climate change technical study required, with the under the GWR guidelines. It's part of the work plan required for the plan. So they will have had their technical study in draft form by then, and, it's a stakeholder working session. And that's to brainstorm integrated approaches to climate change, adaptation strategies, and to discuss those strategies in an open forum. So it's kind of present the technical study and then do a working session to identify strategies. And that will be led by the consultants who are preparing the climate change workshop.
and what's your timing on that one now? We're still short for June.
Yeah, 1 year. So let's talk about the project integration workshop first. Did we settle on what we're gonna do with that? Because as Terry pointed out, I think that's gonna be a very critical meeting for what comes out of the working group. Because it'll be the first time they've all gotten together and really
It'd be huge.
looked at what each other's working on and how they might integrate and make comments on something that's a primary responsibility of one of the groups. So you have it on your schedule here for late June. Is that still something you think is the best date?
Well, I think that we would have to wait till after long forms were submitted, so it would probably bump it to late July.
Okay.
And, the thought was that it would occur before the management group meeting, so that we would have all the feedback, on these projects from the work groups to present to the management group all at once. The other option is to, if you guys would like to see the projects first, before the work group started on it, and we can have the integration workshop after.
What do you think, anybody?
I think once these guys get together, the ballgame's really gonna change and accelerate.
I tend to agree with that.
to hold it before the next management group meeting?
I think so.
So the next that management group meeting would be at the end, it's, I think the end of July, unless we wanted to have a special meeting in August. So I think staff would need a couple of weeks to kind of put all the projects into a summary form for the work groups to work through at the integration workshop, so probably mid-July. And then we'd have a couple of weeks, or a week to get it together for the management group meeting.
Okay. So if you had it, where is that? Going on the theory of Wednesdays. Do you think the 8th or the 15th of July?
The deadline for submittal is the 1st, so maybe the 15th.
Okay. Which is good. So the integration workshop will be 15th July. And then our meeting will be the end of July, where we do the project ranking and prioritization. So what's that, July 31st, 29th, 31st, somewhere in there? Anybody have a preference? Everybody still awake?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go for the Wednesday. No, let's go for the 31st. I'll give you a little bit more time, a couple more days. I'll be good step all night and work on it. I say that because we just got through doing that with 105, so.
So the climate change workshop is going to be all day? It's going to be it's going to be innovation and climate change together?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the afternoon would be the climate change, and it would be for an all-day of meetings.
What day was that?
That would be the 15th, July 15th. The caveat will be, I have to check with the climate change consultants. I had to check for the last 2 weeks of June, so I'm not sure about July.
Okay. Well, say tentative, and then you can always get back to us.
Will you put together kind of a little summary of all this and how long we're gonna need to be there? Then come to my office after you get done with that, organize the front part of my desk. Did I overstep my boundaries?
If she had those capabilities, Randy would have a clean desk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Washing that Randy, so would I.
No, I don't want it.
No, if you see his office, you don't want it.
Yeah.
He needs room
Yeah,
hours.
see, my office. Well, that'd be
Okay, so
helpful,
where
you
are
guys,
we
just
now?
cut
We
so,
got
you know,
Yeah,
what the time commitments are, where we need to, you know, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so project prioritization / ranking, our group will be July 31st. And unless the world stops before then.
And we're kind of hanging in your timeline.
Not too far. I think, it'll work out.
Now, I'm not 100% that I'm understanding what is the project prioritization workshop in relationship
To the project
to
ranking.
the ranking.
So this is, the project prioritization and ranking for the management group is the process where you guys all go through and rank them, and the purpose of the workshop is after that to give the work groups and stakeholders an opportunity to review that list of ranked projects and to, they don't agree to kind of put
Tell us how
forward their
nice we are.
Right.
to make your argument
We
for
should
why
wear
it
armor
should.
that
Who
way.
you paying to show up?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And that would be
That's
the
the-
public, with that, as
Yes.
Councilor Jackson has pointed out, that would be a point where the public could come in and make comments.
And
we're gonna be
when-
able to both places, this is where they're.
Well, that would be very helpful after your,
Yeah.
I think your time.
Okay. So
That's
you're
right.
still, I think your August / September tentative timeframe there still works.
Okay.
Sure.
And we could set that at a later date.
Right, we can set that when we're meeting.
And then, of course, there will be another opportunity, the draft plan, for folks to comment on any part of it, including the project inclusion too. So there's a series of opportunities.
And then the last opportunity for an environmentalist like me is the environmental document that the individuals do. Is that right?
for their individual projects.
Okay, so we got all three issues of item 6 done. Your satisfaction?
Joe has a
The
question.
prioritization ranking, that's July 31st? Did I hear that right?
For the management group.
Okay, but our solicitations due the 1st of August. What did I miss?
And we moved it, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did, we moved it to August 1st.
Good catch.
Thank you.
It'd have been easy to rank them.
What happened?
Yeah.
Zero.
Can we adjourn?
So then we're looking at the middle of August for the project integration workshop and the end of August.
Okay, now with Russell, can you just send us a note? Tell us how long.
Yeah, this is getting way too confusing.
Well, we could hold off on scheduling those next ones.
Just do it, tell us.
Just do it.
Yeah, just tell us when they are.
So Fridays are a good day and
We're never gonna
Wednesdays.
get it
Fridays and
together.
Wednesdays, and give yourself enough time to get it right.
Yeah, Friday and Wednesday, and you figure out what works for work group schedules.
Okay.
And your schedule, and we will make ourselves available.
Or not, depending
Or
on
not.
whether Mr. Jackson's gonna be here.
Or
Hey,
some of us.
You
that have-
already, I've got to go home and tell my wife you've already wiped out our anniversary.
Oh,
Well, tell her happy anniversary.
You can bring her to the meeting with you.
Oh, I'm sure she would love it.
Honey, I have a great celebration. No, that's great. Okay, are we done with item 6?
Yeah.
You guys are getting unruly, I swear. Okay, item 7, everybody's favorite subject.
Okay. So the project selection and ranking process. So the purpose of going through this process, you guys have already identified them, but to identify the actions needed to make the plan effective, to develop a clear and consistent review and selection process that you can apply to all projects. And then the project review process, the first step is to ensure the projects meet the minimum standards for inclusion in the plan, and I think that's what we decided to do for the initial vetting. And then to seek opportunities for integration. And then finally to prioritize the projects, and that's essentially how well they meet the Upper Feather River urban goals, objectives, sorry, and then also to how well it meets the state grant program objectives. So for eligibility, the project must be located within the region boundaries. Has to include the specific elements for the Prop 84 guidelines, and there has to be an approved urban. That's for the submittal of the grant. And then the project proponent has to have adopted the Upper Feather River OM. The projects also have to have the support and approval of the landowners on which the project is located, and then the projects have to address the plan objectives. The project review process includes a review of consistency with laws, regulations, permit requirements, and local plans, identification of potential conflicts with the urban plan objectives or other projects, and again, the identification of potential integration with other projects. There will be an assessment of each project according to the project ranking criteria that is decided upon by the management group. And then there's the screening for potential environmental justice and impacts to disadvantaged communities, which is a requirement under both Prop 84 and the Prop 1 guidelines. So prioritization of projects is a requirement of the Prop 84. We do have to go through the process, and it's to help the management group and the state evaluate the projects. The most competitive projects, again, are going to be the ones that best meet the region and the state priorities. For developing this process, what we're going for is that we have a clear, objective, and fair process. A consistent method for objective ranking, and then the considerations are the plan objectives, integration of projects, and project need, the overall strength of the project, and then again the acts of environmental justice. So staff has drafted a methodology which is included in your packet, and this is after review of the surrounding region Irwins, as well as a couple of others that have been, really good plans within the state. It is designed somewhat to match the questions in long form. We made sure cross-reference that they all show up in the project selection criteria so that it's easier to make those correlations. Staff is recommending the 2 project lists, the prioritized projects for inclusion in the plan, and then the tracked projects as an appendix.
And the tracked projects are, as you explained earlier today, ones that haven't quite made it to the plan, but are maybe coming along in the process, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah, not quite ready for development, the technical studies aren't done, or they don't have a firm, identification of the boundaries of the plan or something like that. And so that would be, it's a way to track what upcoming projects there might be for future consideration. And it's a good idea as the Irwin project goes on after we get an adopted plan, we review those projects periodically and keep it current for upcoming projects.
So I'm gonna comment, this is where you wanna get on the list if you're not a priority, at least you're in the track.
Sure, yeah, I get that.
Which will give you an advantage, and then the other funding source, because you can say you're on the track list for your, even if you're going out for a foundation someplace.
There's the big, it's kind of like you.
Okay, well,
Really?
I'm not gonna beat around the bush with this.
I'd say go
because
with it.
I think we really need to think about this situation, and that all 3 of us have been serving on the Sierra Nevada Conservancy boards at various times. And early on, the Conservancy would go out for grant proposals, and they would come in, and the board members actually made the decision. And in the case of the Conservancy, frequently the board members were making decisions for things that were as supervisors in our district or in our counties. And our knowledge of the project and the organizations and the whole situation was probably greater than most everybody else's on the board. And then there was the perception that that was too political, and therefore they needed to come up with some way to do it other than that. So they started getting the project proposals and using a ranking system like this, and having some people unknown to any of us, right? Because they don't want us to be able to influence them, assigning the points to them. And then the project comes forward, and now you're looking at a project that maybe because you're familiar with the area, is not a good project, or maybe the organization is not structurally sound enough to probably complete the project, or any of the other things that we would know in our districts and what we deal with on a daily basis. And it was kind of like, well, the decision they've been ranked, and XYZ ranked number 1, and so it doesn't matter what you think. Now it's the project. And I know this has left a sour taste in all of our mouths, because there just comes a point where I think in looking at things, it's a personal judgment to some extent, or a judgment of the knowledge of some of the extenuating circumstances that I just mentioned. So I don't know how we overcome that, but I can tell you that 3 of us are sitting here with that concern because we've lived it. So I don't know, at what point maybe we rank them, and then there's so many points that the governing board assigns as they review the rankings. Or I guess I'm sitting here thinking, well, once we set this criteria, we made the decision on the project.
Yeah.
Because then anybody that has this, and this, they can just sit down and go, okay, well, I need to go find 4 partners, so I get 4 points for partners. And, whether the partners are real or not.
Well, yeah, but we could do this differently than that.
Well, I'm suggesting let's look at it differently.
Yeah, well, may I,
Please.
Madam Chair, may I suggest one?
Yes, I would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ever so much.
I really don't have one, but I'll make it.
I knew you did.
No, but I think it's like a process of a hiring process. We can say that everybody, because when you're in a public agency, when you hire somebody, it has to be so legal, it makes even Michael Jackson weak. So what the process is, you have to score everybody on an objective basis, But when you cross a certain threshold, then there's 5 projects, or there's 10 projects. Then it becomes a little bit more subjective. So, I mean, I would recommend that we would start with a process that we don't have to deal with the whole universe. In other words, if we choose the top X number of units, and even though it won't address that perfectly, because it'll be a number. But then again, we have to set a little bit different criteria for the next step. But that would eliminate a lot of us that would be so low, the numbers would be low.
That they wouldn't even really rise to consider.
Yeah, that we wouldn't really even need to deal with. Now, there's always a problem. But generally speaking, in my experience, it's been pretty consistent when you objectively look at people using the same scale. That's the difference. So we might see, if I'm allowed to do it, my 2 is not as heavy as his 3. And so what would happen is that by going around the room, everybody would put a number together. And I'd score an individual as a 10, and you might score that same individual as an 8. But then the next individual would be on his same scale. So it'd be pretty consistent, and what would happen is, we'd probably end up with 5 or 6 projects, or 50, or whatever the number is. Then we probably would all say, probably these 5 or 10 could be funded. Now we match that to how much money. See, we don't know how much money we're getting, so that's kind of hard. But if we had the money, then we'd say, oh, great, we got 5, we got dollars, we're done, let's go home. So I'm not saying that's what we should do, but I hope that will get the discussion going.
Carl?
I would suggest that in your ranking process, you have a line item that says objection, so that folks like yourself are aware of what we've got problems up at Almanor, and we know there are people up there who just damn well couldn't do these projects. If you give them $1 million, you could present an objection to that, and then have the other members evaluate that and fit that into your ranking process.
Like a veto on the security.
Security council.
Well, it's like our glorious Senate in the federal government, have a filibuster process.
We could filibuster, you'd win.
Yeah. Let's send Russell to the talk for
Yeah.
hours. Nonsense.
So what do you think, Bill? I know you
Well,
have a concern.
I do have a concern, and it's similar to yours. I've read through these points, and I can tell you, based on my experience, once you establish this, you pretty much select which projects you're going to fund. I mean, I know maybe I'm overstating it, but not by much. You've gone about 80% of the way to deciding which projects you're going to fund. Because once you adopt the criteria, we've already adopted the resource management strategy. We've adopted our goals and objectives. We did that earlier in this meeting. And now we're coming down to where we're going to base the criteria on our goals and objectives that we adopted. And then we adopt this criteria scoring plan, and these projects come back with numerical scores. It's going to be very difficult to, you pretty much decide which projects are going to be approved in what order, because they're based on the goals and objectives that we approved.
So you're suggesting shifting someone out of the way as a guide, or what?
No, what I'm saying is that adopting these criteria, these 1 through 14 criteria, is basically going about 80% of the way to deciding which projects you're going to approve. Because some of this is so specific. I mean, you're giving 3 points for this, and you're giving 2 points for that, and you're giving a point for this, and you're giving a point for that. I mean, and some of the, in my opinion, some of the points are not equally weighted. In other words, I think some things are getting, and this is just a subjective opinion of mine, but I think some of the things you're giving points for aren't as important as some of the other things that you're giving points for. Does that make sense? Yeah. In other words, giving a point for every partner has the same weight as giving you a point for a project that affects public health. I don't know how that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you're giving a point for a project that deals with threatened or endangered species, and you're giving the same point if they deal with public health. So at this point, you're making some pretty subjective decisions about what you think are important, but the decisions you make today, if we approve this today, and I'm not sure that's a good idea since we've already approved the plan goals and objectives, so it's not like we're not letting the public know what we think is important. But to actually decide what you're gonna give points for on a particular project based on the goals and objectives is something that I'm not sure we're even gonna be ready to do today.
Unless it was nothing more than a premise upon how you would score, and it's just an objective.
But once you put it out there, perception becomes reality.
I'm gonna hold you to it.
And you're gonna hold it.
Yeah.
And when this project comes back and it's got an 85 points and this project has 75 points, you like this project better, but it's got 75 points. Based on the criteria, the objectives that you established, the process you created, you are pretty much locked in, as Sherry and I found out with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, to approving that project. I mean, to do otherwise leaves you open to all kinds of political and maybe even, I don't think, legal
Oh, I
consequences.
do.
Oh, well, there you go.
I'm not sure this management group meets the fair up there if any of your organizations apply.
Yeah, so to me, adopting these criteria now is
So what are your suggestions, we hold off on this till later?
yeah, because we adopted the management strategy a couple of meetings ago. Today, we adopted the goals and objectives, so it's pretty clear where we're going. We have a mission statement. It's pretty clear where we're headed. So it's not like we're leaving the public in the dark about what we intend to do and what we think is important. We've established that. But to actually get down to the point of saying this gets a point, that gets 2 points, that gets 3 points, I don't know if we're ready to do that yet without a whole lot more discussion and maybe even some more public input.
Well, actually, it's not for approval today.
Oh, well, then.
It's a request for discussion.
There we go, we're discussing.
Okay, well, that's fine. Okay, well, so then I get into my discussion point, which I kind of touched on already. And I think some of the weight that are given to some of the things here aren't necessarily accurate.
But if you were looking at conceptually as to how to score something, then how would you present the idea?
Well, just let me give you
to
an
an
example.
individual?
Give me an example. Number
I'm
one,
not giving example points.
here's an example. Number one, relevance to the plan objectives. The scoring is based on the number of plan objectives identified by the proponent in the project formation form. Projects can earn 1 point for each objective for a total of X available points. Well, to me, it's 1. Because if it meets one objective and it's a great project, it did it.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be able to be leveraged on a
It
different
shouldn't
one.
be
that doesn't meet its
outscored
minimum.
by one that met 2 of the objectives just because you can.
By
say-
design.
By design.
By design, and that's where it gets.
There's- You know what I'm saying? If it meets an objective, then it's a qualified project, in my opinion.
I don't disagree.
Which is,
What more do you need to do?
well, therein lies the explanation, basically, what you're talking about without the specificity. This is just kind of like how you're gonna rank it.
Yeah, well, that was the first example I had on my list.
That's kind of, I always thought this was kind of like an example.
And to me, meeting an important objective of the plan is more important than having a couple of partners. But yeah, you get 2 points for having 2 partners, but only 1 point if you met one of the most important objectives that we're trying to do.
Well, and the thing that really, I really would like to throw the partners' points out completely.
Yeah.
Because anybody that's ever worked on a grant knows that you call every Tom, Dick, and Harry that you possibly know and get them to sign a letter saying, I think your project's really cute and nice.
I want to
And like this criteria says, it's technical advisory councils are stakeholder groups that are not actively participating or funding the project.
Yeah.
I don't think you get points just because somebody says they think you're nice.
You get a point for that.
You know, if they're actively engaged in it, like if it was real partners,
Co-sponsor, yeah.
you know, like
Co-funders, yeah.
two utility districts that decide to go together, I could see points for that because that encourages what we want, which is that coordination and cooperation. But just because you go out, I'm probably being a little too blunt, and it's probably being live streamed, but that is how it is. We all know that have ever dealt with any NGO or any organization that goes out for grants. You immediately think of everybody you've ever passed at the coffee shop or at the post office and get them to sign a letter of support. You write the letter, so all they have to do is sign it.
It's all by volume.
So it is. So that's why I say, I think unless, I could see us signing something for partners that are really partnered, where they're all bought in and they're contributing and they're on the line for it, but I can't